For this week's main interview, we're joined in the studio by Efraim Halevy, former director of the Israeli Mossad. But before we begin, let's take this look at his very distinguished career.
Efraim Halevy, the 9th director of the Israeli Mossad, spent 4.5 years as the nation's chief spy master, followed by a short stint as head of Israel's National Security Council. Before entering the top Mossad job in 1998, Halevy served as Israel's ambassador to the European Union, where he cultivated ties with the rapidly expanding members of the NATO alliance, many of whom had been part of the Warsaw Pact during the Cold War era. It was from this ambassadorship in Belgium that Halevy was rushed back to Israel to clean up the mess. During Benjamin Netanyahu's first term as prime minister, from a botched Mossad operation in the Jordanian capital to assassinate Hamas leader Khaled Mashal. In his book, Man in the Shadows, Halevy detailed the fury and betrayal felt at the time by Jordan's King Hussein, the monarch he got to know so well as trusted top advisor to Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, during the negotiations that resulted in the 1994 treaty between Israel and the Hashemite Kingdom. Born in London to an Orthodox Jewish family, Halevy immigrated to Israel in 1948 amidst Israel's proclamation as an independent Jewish state. Next month, he turns 83, yet continues his high-intensity world travels, addressing audiences on geopolitical and social developments and engaging in so-called track 2 diplomacy. For the past 10 years, Halevy has been chairman of the Shah Center for Jewish History. The longtime Mossad veteran also holds the title of chairman emeritus of the Israeli Intelligence Heritage and Commemoration Center. Efraim Halevy, strategist, spy master, diplomat, and public policy practitioner. Welcome to Strictly Security.
We'll be back after the break with Efraim Halevy. Don't go away.
Unflinching, opinionated. Weeknights, David Schuster and Shayna Estulin bring you analysis, interviews, and opinions that connect us to the Middle East and the world. Watch Crossroads weeknights starting at 6 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
I'm Khaled bin David.
And I'm Nareet Ben.
Join us on The Rundown here in the heart of the Middle East for a candid conversation.
A closer look at the stories born out of this region and driving changes all the way to Washington.
Every Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
We're back with Efraim Halevy. Efraim, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Let's start with the Iranian threat, which seems to be a single-minded focus of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. Is there any opportunity to pursue directly with the Iranians that should be explored, or is Netanyahu correct in focusing on galvanizing a coalition of like-minded Sunni states in the Gulf against the common threat from Tehran?
There are two aspects to the threat. One is the nuclear threat that was dealt with in the agreement reached 2 years ago. And another 8 years to go before anything can happen on the nuclear front. And that's enough time to do many things in that area. The principal threat now is the Iranian presence in Syria. It's a serious threat. It's more important in the short term than the nuclear threat. There's much that can be done and should be done. This could lead to war. People are talking about war. People are preparing for war. But in a situation like this, it's all the more important to do everything possible to avert a war.
Including direct engagement with Iran? Is that in the cards?
Including direct engagement with Iran, if this creates prospects. But you have to be prepared to talk to them, level-headed, eye-to-eye, face-to-face, and to negotiate in a serious manner, even if you do it secretly and not for the public knowledge at this stage.
Wow. Now, what about the likelihood of this coalition of like-minded Gulf states ever coming about? Isn't it preconditioned on meaningful progress toward a Palestinian peace deal?
I think the combination of Gulf states and other states who are dealing with Israel in various forms and in various areas and in various shades of thought, I think it's important, I think it's useful, but I think that ultimately a breakthrough, a major diplomatic breakthrough, cannot take place without something happening on the Palestinian front.
You've called in the past for direct dialogue with Hamas, and now that Cairo is brokering reconciliation talks between Fatah in the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza, is now the opportune time to engage directly with Hamas?
Every time is an opportune time. I think it is important to realize that Hamas has come to stay. It is a power in a very, very vulnerable area for Israel in the south, and it doesn't make sense not to have a channel of discussion and dialogue with a player, however you may not like him, however much his culture and his policies are not to your liking.
Yitzhak Rabin credited you as a key facilitator in the '94 peace treaty with Jordan. You also stepped in to save the day after a serious crisis over the assassination attempt on Khalid Mashal. And now we're months into yet another crisis with Jordan over the killing of 2 Jordanian citizens by an Israeli security guard in Amman. Is it just coincidence that these 2 main crises happened under Netanyahu's watch? Or is the Prime Minister particularly insensitive to the needs and concerns of the Hashemite Kingdom?
I do not think the Prime Minister is insensitive to the necessities and the vulnerabilities of the regime in Jordan. But I do think that at this particular point in time, given the fact that in this incident there were 3 people in the room where it took place, 2 of them are dead, and the only one who emerged is the Israeli who was alive, I think it's incumbent upon Israel to take the necessary steps to satisfy the needs and the concerns of the Jordanians on this issue. And I think that in this case, just as in the Mashal case, what has to be asked by the leadership of Israel is not what is Israel's interest, but what is Jordan's interests, and try and meet that interest to the best that it is possible.
What about the Russian presence here in this region, which is so strong due to their involvement in Syria? Is this more of a manifestation of a calculated strategy well carried out by Putin, or perhaps a mere reflection of perceived American weakness?
I think this is a strategy of President Putin. I think it's a matter which is central to what he calls the national interests of Russia. And as such, it is a major effort on his part in the Middle East. I think he is committed to this effort, means and persons of the highest quality. Just about a month or 2 ago, the highest serving general of the Russians in the area was killed in action. Yes. Long way away from Damascus, in the northeastern part of Syria, Deir ez-Zor. He was brought to burial in Moscow. Yes. And his burial was attended by the Chief of Staff, who not only feted him, but also said that this general was not only the advisor of the Syrian forces, but he was also commanding a new corps of the Syrian army at the same time, which was in action in that part of the world. This is a departure. This is something new in the way the Russians are approaching their activities, and it shows they intend to be here for many scores of years to come.
Wow. And is it a result of American weakness, or should it be in America's interest to try to ameliorate their influence in this region?
I think America has to decide whether it wants to write off the Middle East, and I don't think this is in the interest of the United States. The United States is very much involved in affairs in the Middle East. It is invested enormously, especially in the Gulf. You have a big fleet of the U.S. Navy in the Gulf, who has firepower which is greater than the firepower of Russia, and therefore I think that the United States should take this power that it has and use it not in the battlefield, but as a backdrop to reinstating the United States as a major player, which it is not today.
And speaking of American leadership, were you concerned at all by this intelligence leak from the president, no less, to the Russian ambassador in the White House?
I'm not familiar with the details of it, but I have known many mishaps in the past. I don't think it was a glorious moment in the history of the United States of America, but I think the time comes when you have to pass and go on.
And I wanted to ask you about the situation in Syria. Is it possible to reunite the country after it's been so torn by war?
Nobody has the international authority and capability to redraw the borders in the Middle East. It's not in our power, not in the power of Israel, not in the power of anybody else in the region. And once one border is redrawn, you open up a hornet's nest, and the result could be catastrophic. Therefore, I think that Syria, in its borders, will have to struggle in order to put itself together. Is this possible? It depends on many factors, not only on Assad, but also on the opposition. It depends on outside players like Turkey, like Iran, unfortunately, and Israel. And if Israel's concerns are not met in one way or another, I think there will not be peace for a long time to come.
Finally, Ephraim, last question. You were quoted in a speech that you gave to Jewish students in London about the fact that your academic legal background helped you in some instances where time to time you have been forced to break laws. And I have to ask, have any of these instances occurred on American soil?
First of all, may I correct the quotation? I didn't say that I broke the law. I said I evaded the law. It's something like tax evasion and tax crime. Tax evasion is permitted. I think I had ways and means of evading the necessities of normal conduct in various parts of the world, never on United States territory. And I don't think this was anything that was necessary for anybody else carrying an Israeli document, an Israeli passport, who was within the borders of the United States of America.
On that note, never on American soil, Efraim Halevy, thank you so much for your insights. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you.